Thank you for inviting me. Have you done your Christmas shopping? I'm well known as I'm a kamikaze Christmas shopper. I've been the day before when I go on vacation. Right, okay, I'm going to take about half an hour and just run you through the Growth Commission. As is probably infamous by now, I have my doubts about the Growth Commission. But I thought what I would do is, you've all read it. Well, I actually have read it. It's 350 pages. It's quite, I say it's repetitive. I don't think it was well edited. But what I've done is, the presentation is really going to take you through the three parts of the report. And I'm going to try and, as best I can, give you what it says rather than initially criticise it. But then I'll add my gloss as we go along. Andrew Wilson, author, both as the mastermind, but also as actually, I think he wrote most of it. Andrew and I go back a long way. When I joined SNP in 1996, Andrew was a youthful advisor to Alex Salmon, and the two of us worked very closely together on economic issues, advising Alex. So nothing I say today I haven't said to Andrew to his face. The Growth Commission emerged just after the 2016 Brexit vote. At that point, the shock of Brexit, in fact, Scotland had voted 2/3 for Remain, opened up the whole question of an instant second independence referendum. And Nicola called the Growth Commission into being, chaired by Andrew, in order to clear the decks, in a sense, in the run-up to what was seen at that point as a very quick move towards that independence referendum. And the initial brief was to deal with some of the issues that had not been dealt well in the first 2014 independence referendum. In particular, if you look at all the polling data, people were not convinced by the SNP's stance on currency and keeping sterling. I think at that point, the initial plan to keep sterling hadn't been well thought through. It was just a way of parking an issue of currency, and nobody thought very much would be made of it, the same way we had parked the whole NATO question. But of course, the currency question became a focal point for the no camp in 2014 to fight back. The then Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, the Labour Party, Alfred Darling, I mean, they used the currency issue in a big way, and I think that helped to make the case for independence look confused, can't implement it. And so, when we came to 2016 with the Growth Commission, one of the key issues was, what do we do about currency? And can we get that off the table? So, Andrew's appointed to chair the Commission. Within a week or two, he'd come down to London. I phoned him, and he came down to London, and we convened a discussion of myself and Roger Mullen, then also an MP, and on the Growth Commission, and Ian Blackford, then not the Westminster leader of the SNP, but the spokesperson on pensions. So Ian and Roger and Andrew and I sat down in a pub and had a long discussion, and we decided that, as far as I understood the conversation, that the key thing was to get the Growth Commission report done very quickly, like Andrew said, by Christmas. So you're really talking about 3-4 months. In the presumption that there'd be an independence referendum within by the spring of 2017. And we all said it's impossible, but we're going to try. At that point, we had 56 SNP MPs, and we had big staff, big research staff. And Andrew's view was that we should use the independents, use the SNP group and people we had there and our research staff to do a lot of the background work on the Commission. So that was clear. Now, of course, life moved on. Theresa May called a election, general election out of the blue, lost it, made a deal with the DUP, SNP lost 20 odd seats. Nicola, I think for quite sensible reasons, decided, well, we need to put the brakes on here, can't move to an independence referendum right away. We need to see how the Brexit debate is going to play out in this new situation where we've got a minority Tory government. As we've seen, hasn't played out at all. It's been chaos for a year and a half. However, the impact on the Growth Commission was the Growth Commission seemed to disappear. A lot of work was going on in the background, but you know, when I would phone up or email Andrew, not a lot was emerging. Now, in the interim, of course, the Commission did go on doing its work in the background. Well, Andrew hired a series of external consultants who did a lot of the background research, which doesn't appear, all the background papers have never been published, and that was eventually began to morph into the final Growth Commission which Andrew produced. So in a sense it became, as the process for producing the Commission report became much more internalised. As I understand it, there was a draft report ready quite some time ago, but the version that was published in the spring of this year, there was a gap between the initial being finished, I think towards the end of last year, and eventually appearing. And there were some changes going on. And so it appears in the spring of this year, and of course, as we know, changes, and sterlingization had crept back in. Now, what I'm going to do is quickly run through the report. It comes in 3 bits. Part A is quite a chunky piece about how we raise the growth potential of the Scottish economy. And there's I have to say, there's lots of, I mean, it's difficult to read, I don't find it a terribly fluid document, but it's full of facts and figures and tables and things, so it's quite good just to call it up on the internet, read through it, because it's got lots of good material that you can use in campaigning, which you can't gainsay. So good research, good hard kind of data stuff. It's good stuff. Independent Scotland, we'd start, even with the deficit, we'd start as one of the richest countries in the industrial world by the usual calculation, which is national income, gross domestic product per head of population. And we actually, at the moment, we are as rich per head of population as France or Japan. Right? We're, you know, no one can gainsay that, even though the No campaign is going to try and say that. Now, of course, just a caveat, GDP per head does not, that's an average, it doesn't translate into individual income and individual prosperity. As you know, most people in Scotland have had a flat income now for 10 years, post the banking crisis. That's true of a lot of the Western world. So although the economy is growing, we're not getting richer as individuals, the money's going elsewhere, the banking system. So we are a rich country, but the distribution of the wealth, that's an issue. The Growth Commission doesn't go into that. There's some bad news, and this is really the core argument in Part A of the Growth Commission report. Though Scotland is, you know, performs as well as some of the big industrial countries, when it comes to comparing with the best of the small industrial countries, the Scandinavian countries, New Zealand, Holland, Switzerland, Austria, to compare, and the World Commission does a very detailed comparison in this respect. If you compare Scotland as it is at the moment economically to the best of the small countries, we are doing nowhere near as well. And in fact, when you look at the income per head in the best and the average out of the small countries, it's about 4,500 behind these smaller countries. So the argument being, if we were independent, if we had control of our economy, and we were growing the way other small countries grow, we would be significantly better off. And if you took that extra, suddenly we had £4,000 plus per head of population extra in the kitty, you could solve most problems Scotland has. You could make the NHS work very well, you could pay a decent pension, one of the worst pensions in the Western world. So there is something to be gained from independence economically. Now, another way of saying this, if you look at the last 30 years, the average growth rate per year, sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, the average it out, over the last 30 years, Scotland grows about 1.5%. What we produce grows 1.5% a year, real terms, on average, done that over the last generation. The other small countries in Western Europe, the advanced industrial countries, they grow at 2.5%. That's a huge jump, it's a huge difference. And that's the average. Some of the best are growing at 3 and 4% a year. If you grow, suppose you grew at 3.5%, 4% a year for a decade, that's 45% sudden increase in your national wealth. There's not a problem, a basic problem in terms of health, employment, pensions you couldn't solve within a decade if you had the sort of growth other small countries have. That's the prize of independence. Now, why are we so bad? And the report looks at this, partly looks at it in quite detail, some good arguments there, and there are things that we could say intuitively. We're stuck with bad UK policy, austerity, most decision making is dominated by the City of London and by the needs of the banks rather than making real things for real people. The model of the economy that the banks have created, it's debt-fueled consumption. Our economy grows because we spend things, actually buy an awful lot from abroad. We do that on tick. People's house, the value of your house goes up, you think you're richer, you borrow more, and you buy from abroad. It's not a sustainable kind of economy. What has actually changed, and the report's quite good on this, over the last 20 years, 25, 30 years, a lot of indigenous Scottish industry has just disappeared. We used to have quite a big high-tech sector disappeared, we used to have our own brewing industry disappear. What's happened is that the bits of Scottish industry that are left are gradually being sucked into a supply chain that goes down south of the border rather than external to the rest of the world. So our exports, we have quite strong exports, nowhere near as good as other small countries. We're very good at food and tourism, but in manufacturing exports we're actually getting much weaker than we were before. And what we do manufacture is actually ends up in supply chains that goes via England. We're not direct exporters to the rest of the world. The other small countries that do very well, Scandinavian countries, Switzerland, Austria, so on, they are great external exporters to the rest of the world. And that's a huge market. Scotland, 5.2 million people. It's a too tiny a market to grow very far. If you want to grow, you have to export to the rest of the world. We don't do enough of that because all our supply chains are pushed south of the border. So, big chance, if we're independent, to change all that. I'll put out a balloon up here, you may come back to it in discussion. I'm assuming that, economic growth is a useful thing. Of course, with the planet that's dying and with climate change, we might ask ourselves a broader question about how much emphasis we put on economic growth as opposed to other things we might want to do. I think there's a place for economic growth, but I put it in the context. The Growth Commission report actually says very little about climate change, very little about alternative projects, alternative models of your economy. And I think there is a serious case for saying, if we simply had independence and hooked ourselves up to grow at any cost, that would have complications along the way for the environment and so on, the natural heritage. So park that, it's not in the Growth Commission report. I'll just keep going with the Growth Commission report, but you can have that kind of meta debate later on. So, what Growth Commission proposals? Part A, growth, and they're fairly general. I was a bit disappointed in them, but they're nothing to overly criticise about them, but they're a bit too general. Focus strategy. Small countries are quite good at saying, what's the priority? Let's go for it. Big countries have written no priorities, right? National collaboration. Small countries are very good at collaborating, getting different parts of industry, business, private sector, trade unions to work together. We could do that better than the UK could. Emphasis on innovation, well, okay, that goes without saying. But we do have quite a crop of new high-tech small companies that could grow to something bigger. Export orientation, very important. We need to grow, we need to link into the rest of the world, which better we do. Growth Commission recommends a productivity commission. The thing I began to find a bit jokey about the Growth Commission, every time I hit a kind of complicated issue, it said, let's have another commission. And there's a lost count number of commissions that it says setting up. So it should be a productivity commission, a big group of wise people who decide what to do. Now, The only really concrete thing that Part A comes up with is how do we grow the economy? We need more people, particularly because like a lot of Scotland's like you and me, with our bus passes. We need lots more people who are young folk, dynamic, skilled, they will make the economy grow. So the Growth Commission says we need 500,000 new Scots, get them from abroad, boost immigration, and that will give us the kind of dynamic population we need to make the economy grow up to the 2.5% and beyond that other countries have. And there's various suggestions about how we can improve immigration. One idea I didn't like, I said this to Roger Mullen, came from him, anybody with 75 grand can come to Scotland and set up shop. If we're going to have immigration, I like it, and I'm a passionate fan of more immigration, but I don't think we should follow the UK into the line of, if you're rich, you can come to Scotland. If you're not rich, you don't come. Right. Now, 75, of course, is a lot less. It's actually not a lot of money in one of the things compared to what Gordon Brown, Gordon Brown said when he was chancellor, anybody who's a millionaire can come. A lot of horrible Russian oligarchs who stole the money came. But, I mean, immigration is fine. But my worry is that a single concrete project, let's have 500,000 more Scots after independence, has issues. I think that, and I say this as a passionate supporter of immigration, I think Andrew and the Growth Commission get the economic logic the wrong way around. What you will find is economies that are growing desperately need labour, and therefore they tend to suck in immigrant labour to fill the posts that are being created. And so there's a strong correlation between making your economy grow and immigration. But the causal link isn't people come and therefore your economy grows. The causal link is the other way around. The economy is growing and therefore you need people. And if your economy is not growing, then the people who are coming in, they don't have any houses and they don't have any jobs. And here's my worry, with quite the way the Commission has put things, that we are facing over the next 10, 15 years, as are other countries, a problem that artificial intelligence, huge new revolution in technology, is going to take away a lot of middle-ranking jobs, a lot of, not routine, but knowledge-based jobs that machines can do better than, you won't need to, you go to your GP for degree. I spend far too much time with my GP. You go for get a 10-minute slot. You try and explain what's going on. They give you a tablet. And you go away. A machine can do that much better, and that's going to happen. So if we're facing 1 million jobs to be lost anyway, then I don't think the simplistic notion that's more if we get another 500,000 immigrants in, it will solve the problem of growth. They would. The real issue is not people so much as productivity. The more you can make with less, the more efficient you are, the more you can sell more abroad, the more your economy can improve. So basically, I'm being simplistic, it's my take on things. After 40 years as an economist, investment is what is missing. UK levels of investment in plant, machinery, technology are pathetic compared with Germany, Japan, and other countries. Right, we need investment. Now, the Scottish government, the Scottish SNP government is due. It's come up with a project for a national investment bank, state-owned. The final legislation goes to Parliament in February, March. I've been in various meetings with civil servants trying to push this along. National Investment Bank would give us the chance to direct investment, boost investment in new technology and raise productivity. I personally think that investment is more the key thing that we need. Once you have the investment, the economy starts to expand, you also need the immigrant labour. But that's the key. And there's only about 2 casual mentions in the whole of the Growth Commission report about the National Investment Bank, which I think rather underplays it, because I think that's the key to our strategy. One final thing on Part A. There's a whole section on participation and fairness. And basically, Andrew's argument, which is a very correct one, an economy which is fair and is felt to be fair by the people in it produces a positive impact. People work harder, they cooperate if they feel they're getting something out of the system. If they don't feel they're getting anything, if there's not fairness, then that social cohesion disappears. The thing that Scotland would have over the UK, we could have that cohesion. If we had fairness, it would bind us together in a common project. Andrew comes up with some interesting numbers on this, which is very interesting, very good. If you take New Zealand, for instance, if we paid, and New Zealand is one of the countries in the world which has got almost equal pay in the real sense. So if we did what New Zealand did, and we actually had equal pay in this country, we paid women what we pay men, you'd have to pay women another £6.1 billion, Andrew has worked out. That's what you're being shortchanged. But that would be another 6.1 billion in people with wage packets spent in the Scottish economy, would send the Scottish economy, ramping up. Now, Andrew says this, what he says is fair economy, much more fairer, women would have 6.6, just take one little example. That extra money, that would boost the economy, isn't that a good idea? Then Andrew smiles and walks away. He doesn't actually tell us where we're going to get the 6.1 billion. And again, this is one of my little words, but one of the things that's totally missing in Growth Commission report is how the labour market works, how we organise the labour market. And there's a very simple way, which other countries have used, Scandinavian countries have used traditionally. How do you actually ensure not just equal pay, but how do we keep wages going up? They haven't been flat now, wages have been flat for a decade now. You have national wage bargaining. What happened at the beginning of the 1980s when Mrs. Thatcher arrived? She was systematically destroyed national wage bargaining. National wage bargaining is you're in a particular industry, a particular group of industries, you get paid, everybody sits down, unions, employers, and the state and the government. You sit down, you come to an agreement, and everybody gets the wage rise. You don't do it plant by plant, company by company. I think we have to, I personally think we have to go back to post-independence to some kind of national wage bargaining system that raises wages collectively and ensures that we can just impose equal pay. Fine if you disagree with that, but my basic point is there's nothing in the Growth Commission about how wages and the structural wage bargaining works. If we don't solve that, we're not going to get anywhere. Right, on to Part B. Roller coaster, get through it. Part B is all about taxes and public spending and how we should do that. Now, some good stuff, some good numbers, things you can colour in knocking on doors. If you look at the numbers, the taxes that we raise in Scotland at the moment, they pay for all the services of the Scottish Government, Holyrood. They even cover pensions and social security paid for by Westminster. So we earn enough in Scotland ourselves to cover all the basic services. Anybody tells you otherwise, Scotland couldn't possibly cover its basic needs. Talking rubbish. Right. There will still be a deficit when we're independent. In other words, what we raise in taxes doesn't cover all our public spending. What doesn't it cover? Well, it doesn't cover defence. It doesn't cover the debt that we pay. The Tories have managed to double the national debt to nearly £2 trillion. So after the banks take a cut on that, there would be a deficit. What would the deficit be post-independence? That would be a subject to negotiation between the Scottish Government, independence, and what remained of the UK Government. I have to say that because they've never quite shown the things of the UK Government on a day-to-day basis, even now. Now, there would be a deficit. I think it's reasonable to suppose there would be a deficit. Its scale subject to political debate, subject to political negotiation. But the core services that we use in Scotland, including your pension, including social security, we cover that already by what we make and what we pay in taxes. That's a very good thing to remember. Now, Andrew comes up with a rule for how we should conduct public spending post-independence. But he says that real increases in public spending should be less than GDP growth in order to get the deficit. Now, current deficit, I don't mean, as I say, I don't know what the deficit would be really post-independence because we have to argue that out with the British government. The GERS figures, the famous GERS study, reckons it could be about 7.5%, which is, well, bankers, I don't like bankers, but bankers and economists tend to think that if you're borrowing more than, the government is borrowing more than 3% of national income a year, it's bad. I mean, Americans do it, Americans love it. Donald Trump is borrowing money like there's no tomorrow. Japanese do it, and then no bother. I mean, it's a rule that's only applied to left-wing governments and trying to do something for their people. But anyway, the 3% rule. Andrews says in Part 2 of the Growth Commission, let's take the 3% rule. Let's go for no, we shouldn't borrow each year, government shouldn't borrow more than 3% of national income. That's his rule. But, so we're not going to, we can't, so he's saying don't spend more extra, or more than that. So he wants to try within 5 to 10 years to get the economy into, get rid of any kind of deficit. Andrew comes up with quite an interesting rule. What he says is that every year the economy grows, right? And that means if the economy grows, you spend more money, you earn more money, that ends up as more taxation into the coffers of the government. So the economy grows, and the numbers work out in a kind of strange kind of way that if the economy grew 3% a year, the government would end up with 3% more tax per year, the way it kind of filters through. So what Andrew says is we should have a rule that whatever the growth is in the economy, let's suppose it's 3%, well that would mean 3% more taxes the government gets. We shouldn't use that 3% extra just to, pay more for the health service or education or whatever. We should divvy it up. So, and what we should always ensure is that we keep 0.5% of the extra money the government gets every year, and we use that to pay off previous debts. And the rest we can use to add to public spending. So remember this 0.5% rule. So if the economy grew at 3%, the Scottish government would get 3% more income, but we wouldn't spend all that. We'd only spend 2.5% on new things, schools, whatever, and we keep the 0.5% extra. We'd use that to pay down previous debts, like paying off your credit card. Now, if we follow that rule, actually, if we'd done that over the last 10 years, we'd actually we'd have paid off debt, but Scotland would actually have ended up with more public spending than we actually got from the Tories and Gordon Brown before that. So Andrew says that trend growth, what it just means that what we grow on average, if we follow this rule, we would get spending to increase in Scotland real terms, more for hospitals, more for schools, but we'd still be able to pay off debt. So what the core, part 2 of the report says very simply, what you're going to do is have a golden rule. If you get extra money in the Treasury's kitty, extra tax money, then you keep most of that for extra spending in public services, but you always have half percentage point of anything that so you get 3% extra, half of 1% would go to cutting back on the debt. Okay, that sounds a good rule. We have a problem. The problem is, what happens if you don't grow very fast? If you were growing at our average for the last 30 years, which is 1.5% a year, right? If we grow at 1.5%, independent Scotland grows at 1.5% a year, economy, that would be 1.5% extra money to the Scottish government. Under Andrew's rule in the Commission, 0.5 point has to go to pay the bankers off. Right, so that 1.5%, 0.5% goes to the bankers, 1% extra spending for public services. Now, that would actually mean, even though we were spending an extra 0.5% on public services, that wouldn't be enough to cover the annual kind of growth in the bill for the NHS, because it's driven by drugs and technology, and you and I getting older, and more older people coming into the system. You could have any number of crises. So the average growth in Scotland that we've done for 30 years, 1.5% a year, Andrew's rule does not work. It pays the bankers a 0.5 point and leaves 1 point for extra public services. In other words, for every £3 extra that the Treasury got, Scottish Treasury got, £1 goes to the bankers, £2 would go to the public services. So Andrew's rule, which is a good one, it's a very sensible one, but it works only, it's only really useful if we get the kind of super growth that the Scandinavian countries have. So if we are growing at 3% a year, then that would mean 0.5% goes to the bankers and 2.5% goes to the NHS schools and so on. That would be great. No one could disagree with that. But at traditional levels of growth, Andrew's rule means that public spending gets squeezed. And that's why those members of the Labour Party can actually can't read this thing, can come back and say the Growth Commission report is austerity. Well, it isn't austerity, because Andrew's saying we're going to try and increase public spending for every year. But what the reality is, and Andrew we have to make him admit this, that unless we get the growth up, Andrew's rule means that public spending would be squeezed. It would grow in a tiny fraction and not enough to keep up with the demand of an ageing population. Okay. Just to finish off the second part of the Commission report, Andrew has a few things buried in part 2 on taxes. And this is a direct quote, on page 151. We recommend the headline rate of corporation tax should not rise above the level in the US and UK. In other words, Andrew said, oh, by the way, business taxes, we should keep them the same as the UK. Now, I fundamentally disagree with this. Andrew's argument is, well, if we were to have business taxes which were higher in Scotland than in England, all the businesses go to England, and so we have to stay with what England does. So, I mean, why be independent? If people ask you to do stuff, if your line is to keep taxes, business taxes the same as in England, then what do you want independence? Now, Andrew's rationale that we have to copy English business taxes, otherwise we will lose investment, will go south, is not borne out by the facts. Business is not as fruitless as you think it is. Business goes, well, we just take foreign investment. Foreign investment goes where you can find a stable country, riot and war. It will go somewhere where it can fundamentally where you can find a skilled workforce, and it will go somewhere where it can get the kind of infrastructure and transport, communications links that it needs. So you get inward Germany gets a huge input of inward investment. German business taxes, let me tell you, are 30%. German corporation tax is about 30%. It's expanded by different kinds of business, but it's roughly about 30%. Corporation tax in the UK is falling below 20%. Why is German investment hugely bigger than the UK if the German corporation tax is 50% higher than UK? Because businesses invest, not because they're looking per se for low taxes, they're looking for an environment that helps them. And if a government has high business taxes, but uses those taxes to actually invest in the infrastructure and training and skills that business needs, business will go there. And I did a lot of study, I did a lot of research on the United States, because in America, individual states have individual tax ratios, individual tax regimes. If you go to New England, for instance, where a lot of small states clustered together, they all have different business tax rates because businesses go where they want to go. Now, I mean, if you were investing into America, you can go to Texas where there's practically no taxes at all and be shot, or you can go to Connecticut where business taxes are very high, but you have fabulous infrastructure and a fabulous set of social services for your workers. So you go to Connecticut, right? So this notion that we should race to the bottom that Andrew's put in the middle of the report, I think is not borne out by the facts. I think what we should do is fix our taxes according to what we need to spend in order to provide the infrastructure that provides for business and for the skills level that we all benefit from. So there's some things in there you need to have a look at. Right, very quickly, the big gap, and I don't think Andrew really comes to terms with the end of part 2, is essentially, when you do the numbers, we need something like 22 billion extra investment in plant machinery every year if we're going to if we want to grow at the same rate as the other small rich countries. If you look at the Scottish numbers, we're about 22 billion down on investment per year. That's what our National Investment Bank has to provide. That's the solution. Right, let's go on to the currency, because I want to finish reasonably quick. Right, it brings us to part 3, which is the currency question. Right. The Commission recommends, I'll bring it down, please, right at the very beginning. The Commission recommends that currency of an independent Scotland should remain the pound sterling for a possibly extended transition period. And following the Brexit discussion, you know all about how transition periods can go on and on forever. Andrew in private will tell you 10 years. Now, very simply, here's my argument. I believe we need to have a currency, Scottish currency. I know that you can't just have a Scottish currency overnight. I know that it takes time to implement. And the Baltic countries, for instance, when they left Russia, 2 or 3 years. Right? Can't be done overnight. Right. But there are 2 possible choices. Choice 1, you go to the knock on the door set, you say, our policy post-independence will be to have a Scottish currency. We'll try and introduce that as quickly as possible, but we'll try and do it as fast as possible. But that's where we're going. Or you can knock on the door and say, we're not quite sure what's happening, and we're going to wait for an extended period, and when the time is right, we'll have a Scottish currency. But in the end, it's like the door's closed by the time you go halfway into it. I basically think that Andrew's position is that we don't want to upset the horses, that there's a very large number of pensioners in particular who are the core no vote. We don't want them upset by introducing newfangled currencies. So let's park the currency question until we've got past independence. I don't think that will work. That's my basic disagreement with Andrew. Right, but let's give Andrew his due. Why keep sterling? Continuity, fine. Nothing changes if you get away with it. Our present contracts, your mortgage is all priced in sterling. I mean, all that would have to be changed. Like we've done through national laws, but we'd have to rewrite a lot of contracts. Trade between ourselves and England would, it's the same currency, it's easier, admit that. Value of prices, we all know what happened. We're all old enough to remember what happened when decimalisation came in. There would always be the worry that we have Scottish currency then. At the transition, prices would be surreptitiously raised. So there are issues for keeping sterling, no doubt. And there are, change is difficult, okay? However, if we keep sterling, we keep it for 10 years, right, what's happening? In this 10-year period, when Andrew is saying, we have to get growth up, and we don't get growth up, then we can't have an increase in public spending, how do we get this growth up? Right, we don't set our interest rates or mortgage rates if we keep sterling, set by the Bank of England. We don't have our own currency, we keep the pound, therefore the exchange rate between the pound and other currencies is determined, which is our exports. Determines our exports, because if the pound went up 5%, then your prices go up 5%. That's all determined by Bank of England, UK government. If you have your own currency, you accrue foreign reserves. If you tell people, if you tell the oil companies who are paying their taxes in Scotland, okay, you have to pay in Scottish currency, then the oil companies, you sell oil in dollars, right? So oil companies in the North Sea, they take their oil, they sell it, they get dollars. They would have to take their dollars and buy Scottish pounds from the Scottish Central Bank in order to pay their taxes. The Scottish Central Bank now has dollars. So a huge influx of foreign currency. Foreign currency is very important, it backs your own currency, but it means if we suddenly got billions of dollars flowed in through the foreign exchange system, then we can buy US bonds, and we can buy, and we have an interest. So it creates foreign reserves for the UK, for the Scottish government. And also, above all, this doesn't appear in any discussion in the Growth Commission report. I worry about this. It's easier for the Scottish government to borrow if we have our own currency, and you are saving for your pension, and you're going to, the chances are you're going to end up saving in Scottish bonds. So we actually, countries that have their own currency borrow from themselves. A Scottish government without Scottish currency would be borrowing from the City of London, and that would maximise Andrew's fears that the City of London would impose its will on what Scottish government could spend and tax. But if we're borrowing from Scots domestically, if the Scottish government's borrowing and debts are owed to Scots, then it makes the Scottish government more responsible to the local population, which is a good thing. And it also makes it easier to borrow. I mean, Italy at the moment, Italian economy is very rocky. And everyone's worried. But actually, the Italian government has only ever borrowed from Italians. So, I mean, the European Union and the big banks across Europe, and half, the Italians don't care because they don't borrow from anybody. They don't borrow from the Germans, so they don't have to listen to what the Bundesbank says. The Spanish have borrowed almost totally from Germany, so Spain has to do what the Germans tell them. Borrow from yourself, borrow from your own community. You do that by having your own currency. Right, I'll finish here. After independence, who's going to run Scotland? Well, we have a particular unique problem in Scotland because 70% of the entire financial system is dominated by two companies, by this man, who's closing down all the branches at the moment, Ross McEwen, who runs RBS, and Lloyds Bank, which is run by criminals who are about to go to jail. Here's your choice if you want independence. It's about power, and it's about people taking, it's about taking back power, as the Brexiteers said, taking back control. But we would have a uniquely monopolised banking system if we were independent, because of the existing control of banks. I mean, I'm assuming that we don't get independence in the next 6 months and the Tory government just gives us our share of RBS, so it's actually national. Right, so we have to replace this man with our own banks, our own banking system. I think community banks, I think cooperative banks, I think our national investment bank. But the way to control this man is to have our own currency, because then he has to obey the Bank of the Scottish Central Bank and the rules set down by the Scottish Bank. So that's my fundamental worry about Andrew's extended plan not to have a currency for a decade. Right, sorry that was rather breathless, but that is the Growth Commission report. I rest my case.